Do you think it's interesting in a free state of Florida, you're free to say whatever you want? You're free to say slurs, but you are not free to just draw some rainbows on the sidewalk. That's where the line is.
You're not free to recognize who you love in a classroom. You're not free to speak about your faith in certain environments. If I'm to have one bumper sticker in this race, it's probably that the free state of Florida is a lie.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Delighted to welcome a former member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Back then he was a Republican. Now he's a Democratic candidate for governor of Florida. My former Nicole Wallace co-panelist. It's David Jolly. What's going on, man?
Good to be with you, Tim. Great to be with you. Good to be back in whatever this is kind of world. I've been in the governor's race for 4 or 5 months. I've missed it.
You can't have missed it too much. You get to be out there with the people. How's life out there with the people? You know, it's a little different than being in our holes. You know, looking at the camera. What are you noticing out there?
You know, Tim, it is fascinating. You name dropped Nicole. I'll tell you something she told me when I was at the table with her, maybe a month after having gotten in the race, and I was sharing with her a little bit of a different perspective, just reflecting on my time at MSNBC and a different perspective on the ground running for governor. And you realize kind of how the issues that we talk about every day get distilled differently in a lot of different communities, right? Some of the information isn't digested at all. The finer points of what does it mean to lose your democracy is a conversation that not everybody's having. But Nicole said something that day that was kind of forecasting, I think, where I would end up going eventually. She said, you know, I always enjoy speaking to gubernatorial candidates because their perspective is refined in a very different way. Yeah. And she was absolutely right.
Well,
right?
you actually have a job to do as a gubernatorial candidate, unlike the Congress, which isn't really a job anymore. They post. Their job is kind of indistinguishable from my job at this point in Congress.
That's right. And look, it's kind of like a big city mayor. I mean, it is an executive job responsible for the administration of government, and every state's different, right? In Florida, our affordability crisis has manifested in a home insurance crisis, a property tax crisis, obviously chasing rents as well, car insurance, utilities. And then we have unique issues of culture wars because Ron DeSantis really launched the culture wars 6 or 8 years ago. You could almost argue nationally. We have the war on immigration, fighting communities and not fighting crime. So that's the basket of goods in Florida. But it all starts, I mean, I can tell you from the trail, but you can also look at the data. Nearly 50% of Floridians, when asked, what's the number one issue for you? Not directed, not given multiple choice, just free form. What's the number one issue? Cost in the economy. That's right.
All right. I want to get into Florida issues here for most of the show, but as we're taping, there is some news in that national basket of goods that we have to talk about, unfortunately. The new Secretary of War, former weekend talk show co-host, Pete Hegseth, was doing kind of a Joel Osteen meets Fox and Friends performance in front of the generals that he made fly from all over the world to hear him. Did you have a chance to look at it at all?
I did. Look,
what did you think?
A couple of things ring out. It's clear the poor guy misses his Fox News appearances, right?
Yeah.
I've missed the relationship with the audience, but I haven't missed the vanity of it all, if you will. I think Pete Hegseth misses the vanity of it all, and so had to create.
He's got the vanity mirror actually that he put up in his office.
Yeah, right, right. But the other side of that coin is people see through that, right?
Yeah.
Someone who is not respected never really commands a room, and so they're tolerated, but they're not followed. And I think that's what we're seeing in that room today. Hegseth is being tolerated because of the position he holds, but he's not being respected. And the most important thing is what also rings hollow is I don't believe he really pointed to readiness concerns. You know, for people who may or may not be familiar kind of with DOD and warfighter language and metrics, readiness is what is our national readiness? What is the troop readiness? What are the qualifications to engage if it needs to be in combat or in offensive operations? I'm not sure so much of what he was concerned about was our readiness as much as it was our looks, right? I mean, he was attacking people's weight and their beards and their gender in some really odd ways, as opposed to focusing on, are we going to increase the raw metrics of readiness, of qualifications of our force? Because that also allows us to recognize that that a force that feels confident and respected and welcomed and empowered actually could perform better than one that simply looks like a bunch of strong white men.
Yeah.
I think that's going to ring through in a lot of people's eyes and ears today.
Yeah, I just want to play one audio from that to that point. Kinzinger, your fellow former Republican congressman, turned away from the party. He posted this. This is what you would expect to hear from somebody speaking to the freshman class at the academy, not to our most decorated generals. And I want to play one clip that I think speaks to that.
But today, at my direction, every member of the joint force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year. This also means grooming standards. No more beards, long hair, superficial individual expression. We're going to cut our hair, shave our beards, and adhere to standards. Because it's like the broken windows theory of policing. It's like when you let the small stuff go, the big stuff eventually goes. So you have to address the small stuff.
Telling these fucking generals who've been leading soldiers in wars for decades that they gotta worry about the beard length of the 19-year-old recruit. And it's crazy stuff. And he's out there saying like, no more beardos. I'm interested in whether Donald Trump counts as being in the chain of command of having to do the twice yearly PT, because I will tell you, I'm on board for the new policies if it means Donald Trump has to do the PT as well.
That's exactly right. On Fox and Friends, on Fox News. Put him on a treadmill. Let's see how he performs.
The one more ominous thing about his speech was he did talk about how if the generals didn't like his little TED talk, they should do the honorable thing and resign. And I was a little bit worried that was going to be the ominous part of this, that they were trying to get out people that weren't on board with the full, MAGA program. And then Trump came on and spoke afterwards, and we'll have more on this in the next level because it's happening as we talk now. But he was very low energy, talking about Sleepy Joe and election fraud and tariff as being his favorite word, and how he likes certain paper. And I don't know, all of a sudden it didn't feel quite like that. But there are a lot of military folks in Florida, and this does intersect with your your remit running for governor. And how much do you worry about that? Like this, like the change in, like demanding not commitment to the Constitution and the country, but to these two TV hosts?
Yeah, look, I mentioned readiness as a metric. Another metric, truly a measurable metric, is morale. I mean, that is something that is often discussed, right? Morale is actually injured when you have these vain leaders without qualifications who, through raw power, begin to try to, influence people who truly are qualified and are capable and are ready to lead our men and women in uniform, whether that means on the front lines or an IT command that sits thousands of miles away in a remote small town in the United States. And this is where I think we should, and this is important. This is a reflex I have tried to unlearn on the campaign trail. I think where there are areas for improvement, we shouldn't approach this through this reflexive, they're always wrong or they're always right, sure, or if I'm an R or D, right? And so if there are needed improvements with readiness or morale or whatever the other metrics are, sure, let's pursue those. But I think to have an unqualified Secretary of Defense basically speaking down and insulting the people who are truly qualified and suggesting that because our military, in his mind, doesn't look like something sufficient for central casting on Fox News, that somehow that makes us unqualified and insufficient. First, I'm not sure we've really seen that anyway, right? I mean, we live in the Tampa Bay area where we do have Special Operations Command. We have a lot of special ops and special forces folks that come through the Tampa Bay area. I can promise you, I have not seen a reduction in the fitness level of our special operators that call the Tampa Bay area home. Those are true warriors who are available to us. But we also need a force that actually embraces a lot of other, billets or MOS or the assignments or the requirements, depending on your service. What does that mean? From IT to linguistics, to engineering, we actually naturally will end up with a very diverse, super qualified force of men and women in uniform because of the different requirements and responsibilities that the DoD has. The feel on this with Hegseth is led with vanity, inexperienced, a lack of qualifications, and just trying to fix a problem that we don't have. And that's where I think a lot of it falls flat. But look, it'll probably play well in the MAGA Fox News echo chamber.
All right, let's talk about your race a little bit. I want to just first do some kind of big picture stuff about why you got in the race, then we'll get into the issues. Before we talk about the decision to run as a Democrat, why run at all? You have a nice life.
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of it is going to sound esoteric, but in politics is all about timing, and sometimes a moment kind of reaches out and grabs you. You're right. I've been out of office for 10 years. I'd be okay never to be on a ballot again. I'm not interested in just chasing a generic ballot and finding something to run for. Our kids, Tim, are 6 and 4. This is an incredible time for us as parents, and it is a sacrifice for our whole family to kind of spend some time on the campaign trail. But we are in a moment of dramatic change. We're in a moment of dramatic change nationally, but also in the state of Florida. The affordability crisis is real. The culture crisis, the culture wars have victims. And I say this as, a family whose orientation is a white Christian family, but at 6 and 4, I don't know who my kids will end up loving or worshiping as they grow old, what pursuits they will want to pursue, either professionally or vocationally, avocationally. But I know, because I can already see in front of my eyes, that depending on what that life looks like, they may or may not be welcome in the state of Florida. We have had culture and communities under attack in the state of Florida. At the same time, we've had an affordability crisis. Florida's also become this home for experimenting with all of the really bleeding edge of right-wing stuff. Like, we're going to abolish taxes is something we're going to consider in the next 6 months. It sounds great, right? But it's also important to fund the police and teachers. And, on teachers, look, we pay our teachers 50th in the nation. It's a moral wrong. There's a lot that's wrong with our state. The broader question, though, is why are we running? Look, the reasons why not to run are our 2 children, but the reasons to run are our 2 children. And I believe that we can win this race. I know the data shows this is now largely a toss-up, all of the data. And so that moment is kind of grabbing us. But Tim, I told my daughter, who I tell this story on the stump a lot. She started crying one night and she said, "Dad, I don't want you to run for governor." Now, a 6-year-old child telling you what to do or not to do through tears they could convince you.
It's powerful, right? But I have a 7-year-old child, and sometimes they change their opinion 2 minutes later, know? So it's powerful but fleeting.
She does like all the hotels in Florida with lazy rivers. I bet. But the words that I found where I said, "Sweetie, when you have a chance to change the world, you take it. Yeah. And that doesn't mean you know how it's going to turn out. But I would say, from our national politics to our state politics, the level of activism right now is demanded by the dangers and the threats. Nationally, the dangers and threats to democracy. In Florida, the threats to whether or not people can afford to live here, whether they feel welcome here, whether their democracy is slipping away through attacks at the ballot box. And so I think we all have to do what's within reach. For some people, that's registering to vote or taking somebody to register or organizing or going to a protest. For others, it's standing on the ballot. The last thing I'll tell you is something I've had to reconcile with, particularly in the last few weeks since the Charlie Kirk shooting and some of these other just incredible Trump moves. I don't believe that one election or one candidate fixes the problem and the moment we're in. Yeah. I don't think it's that easy. I really don't. And I had to question myself a little bit. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Yeah. And where I have arrived, because I know this to be true, when we win, when there are new leaders, because there is a new coalition, right? Not just new candidates, but a new coalition of voters who say, enough is enough. We're not going in this direction anymore. We have begun to turn the tide and make the incremental progress that begins to create the long-term recovery that I think.
It's amazing how much you guys are listening to all the details of my life. At the Toronto show, among the things people wanted to talk to me about the most were the fingering trio. If you're not on our YouTube feed, you're really missing out. And the part-time cat I've quasi-adopted, Aretha, the neighborhood cat that comes on by. And a big reason why Aretha's coming by more and more is because of our sponsor, Smalls. This podcast is sponsored by Smalls. For a limited time, you can get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/thebulwark. Smalls cat food includes protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. Starting with Smalls is easy. Just share info about your cat's diet, health, and food preferences. Then Smalls puts together a personalized sampler for your cat. No more picking between random brands at the store. Smalls has the right food to satisfy any cat's cravings. Smalls was started back in 2017 by a couple of guys home cooking cat food in small batches for their friends. A few short years later, they've served millions of meals to cats across the U.S., including my Aretha, the boy named Aretha. Aretha, I had to tell you, it's staving off the demand that I'm going to eventually have to concede to, which is having an actual pet. I'm getting really pressured on this. 7-year-olds, the negotiation skills of my 7-year-old. I mean, I don't know. She might end up being a prosecutor. We'll see how things go, but she is relentless. And I keep trying to have the neighborhood cat satisfy as the pet, and the best way for me to do that is the neighborhood cat will come if I shake the Smalls treats. The main Smalls food is good as well, but the treats, the cat can tell that it's the treats that it likes. We're gender neutraling the cat right now because it's a boy named Aretha. The Aretha can tell, and so then Aretha will come in, and then that buys me another couple days of not having to negotiate over a more permanent pet. What are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve for a limited time. Because you are a Bulwark listener, you get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/thebulwark. One last time, that's 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/thebulwark. There's a lot of conversation. I have a lot of conversation on this pod. You and I have talked about this offline about like what is the right strategy for winning in red states, right?
Yeah.
And and part of that, like the first level of that choice is, should candidates run as an independent? Is the Democratic brand too toxic to run as a Democrat in red states at this point, for whatever reason, fair or unfair? You chose to run as a Democrat. As a former Republican, I've talked to other former Republicans who are hesitant to do that. My instinct is that you made the right choice on this, but for listeners, like, why don't you explain why you went that route rather than saying, "Oh, I'm going to be an independent candidate"? Yeah,
sure. So let's lead with values and then talk kind of electioneering, because I found my home in the Democratic Party. This was not a negotiation. Frankly, I think the independent space, I've been an independent for the last 6 to 8 years. The independent space, I think, has been a natural ally of the Democrats for the last 6 or 8 years. I often called myself through those years a member of the Democratic coalition. But what I see in today's Democratic Party are the values I've always had as a Republican and independent, and I see them in today's party. The three basic values that I mentioned are: the economy should work for everyone. Now, that doesn't mean we condemn success. We should congratulate success. We should hope it creates additional opportunity, find ways to ensure that it does create additional opportunities and investment. But the economy should work for the lowest wage earner, for the person who lost their job, the person trying to afford health care. The economy is not working for everybody right now. We know that. The second value is the government does actually have a role and responsibility in our lives. It's our government. We pay for it. It should be lean and efficient, but we need services for our seniors, our veterans, our storm victims, families in need of excellence in public education, fighting crime, safe communities, right? There is a role for government at a time when it's under attack. Pediatric cancer research, go through the list. The third value is very simple. We should be a place where everyone is welcomed and empowered, regardless of the color of your skin, where you were born, who you love, or who you worship. Those values are Democratic Party values. From the young socialist to the last blue dog standing, I do believe those are the actual values that tether the Democratic Party's coalition together. But why then can we win in Florida if we have so few registered Democrats? It is because those values, when we amplify them to the independent community and to soft Republicans, those values are broad enough to bring them in as well to our coalition. And so I disagree with a lot of Democrats who say nationally, we've got to pivot, we've got to change, we can't be who we were 2 years ago. I disagree fully. The values we have, we need to amplify more into faith communities and ag communities, into the gun communities, into the common sense community, and not ask them to register as Democrats if they don't want to. You don't have to register as a Democrat to vote for a Democratic governor. And so that's why I'm running as a Democrat, because I found a home. To your point about the independent space, I spent 6 years or so trying to organize it with Christy Todd Whitman and Andrew Yang, a bunch of others, and learned so much. It unlocked my personal politics in a big way. We always mistake the independent voter as being a moderate. Some are far left, some are far right, some are moderate. Most of them are just reformers, solution-oriented, and what I call pluralists. Like some answers for them are to the left, some are on the right, some are in the middle. That's my politics. I think we need a state catastrophic fund for insurance. Republicans call it socialism. I call it cheaper insurance. I still think government needs to be lean, but it needs to provide services. I don't know if that puts me in the middle or a little to the right. I don't care. This coalition that is available to us just wants big answers to big problems. James Carville told me when I was trying to organize the independent space, we were on a panel or somewhere. He said, "Jolly, you're just taking votes from Democrats." And I said, "James, these voters are available to Democrats. They're available to Democrats. Not once have Republicans or Democrats tried to reach those independents." And so I'm running as a Florida Democrat on democratic values, but building a coalition broad enough for people outside of our party.
Let me ask you though, okay, generic Democrats have done pretty poorly in Florida recently, whether it be Charlie Crist or Val Demings, or nothing against any of these people, but they've run statewide races and things have gotten worse for Democrats. So I'm wondering, in what ways do you see yourself as different from them, either ideologically or otherwise, or able to offer something that maybe a generic Democrat has not been able to offer to Florida voters?
Yeah, I love that question because Heilman told me, stop being an analyst, start being a candidate. But I'm gonna be an analyst for a minute because national analysts in the media and national Democrats need to get coached up on this a little bit. And I understand it's too easy to accept conventional wisdom. The answer is not first about the candidate. It's first about the cycle. Every cycle is different, right? You know that as well as anybody. So the last cycle for a Florida governor was coming out of COVIDs and lockdowns and culture wars. And Democrats got wiped out the entire ballot. Charlie Crist lost by 18, Val Demings lost by 16, our CFO by 20. But all of the metrics in other races were looking the same. This cycle, we are already seeing Democrats overperform by 15 or 16 points. Florida had 2 congressional special elections that overperformed by 16. A state legislative race just overperformed by 21. National elections. Frankly, the Mandami race, despite the fact that none of his answers are right for Florida and none of my answers are right for the city, voters are screaming for change in this cycle. And they are resentful that leaders aren't listening to them. So the cycle is different. Now, how am I different as a candidate? Look, one, as I just mentioned, I'm trying to build a coalition bigger than the party. Now, we have to amplify our party, but we've got to build a bigger coalition. The other thing is, Tim, I tell my story of change. And I think there's an authenticity to it that we need in politics. People say, oh, Jolly was a Republican, the party left him. No, that's part of the case. The party left me. I also changed as I served. I moved on reproductive freedom in my early years in Congress when I realized how my faith teachings were wrongly being applied to a constitutional question, and I saw the impact on communities that needed access to reproductive care. I became the only Republican to vote against the Planned Parenthood investigation. I tried to save money for reproductive care through community health centers. I started to do these things. I've moved, I've changed, and I tell that story. And most people have done that as well. The last piece, though, if the cycle's different and the candidate's different, the office is also different. This is very important because whether I'm a candidate or not is keeping my analyst hat on. I do think one of the ways to come back for Democrats is through governor's races where we do not have to litigate the president. Now, I'm not setting aside my convictions or asking others to do that about the country and the president. My convictions remain where they have been for a long time. But I'm talking about insurance and taxes and crime and education. And if we focus in on delivering democratic values and solutions to people's lives, to their communities, it's how you get an Andy Beshear in Kentucky, a Steve Bullock in Montana. That's the race we're running. That's how you get a David Jolly in Florida.
All right, a couple of Florida issues really quick. Should people in Florida be free to paint sidewalk chalk rainbows on the sidewalk or not? Is that
They should. Let's go back to local control and home rule. And if communities want to recognize, in this case, the LGBTQ plus community or another community, God bless them, go do it. Ron DeSantis and the governor should keep his hands out of that.
Do you think it's interesting in a free state of Florida, you're free to say whatever you want? You're free to say slurs, but you are not free to just draw some draw some rainbows on the sidewalk. That's where the line is.
You're not free to recognize who you love in a classroom. You're not free to speak about your faith in certain environments. Look, if I'm to have one bumper sticker in this race, it's probably that the free state of Florida is a lie. The free state of Florida is a lie. One, it's becoming the most expensive place to try to buy a home or live. But second, your personal freedoms have been trampled for 6 years now.
Let's talk about that on the expenses. There are two things that jump straight to mind for me. When living in Louisiana, we have some similar problems to Florida, some differences. But number one, you've mentioned it, insurance. And number two, I think is even greater problem in Florida is just housing abundance, like availability of housing.
Yeah.
What are some state solutions you have for those issues?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief because not everybody's in Florida. Look, we're not going to control supply and demand, although we can control a little bit of supply. We're not the Fed. We can't control rates. But in natural disaster states, the homeowners insurance market has collapsed and it's not coming back, and it's being held together by Band-Aids and popsicle sticks. We need a state catastrophic fund, a true CAT fund. I introduced one in Congress. I would lead one in the state. If you remove hurricane coverage from the private market, it cuts homeowners insurance by 60 to 70% in a lot of cases. We have plenty of ways to fund that CAT fund. We have tourist development dollars coming into the state every day. A couple other things you can do. You could provide direct investment in new workforce housing models, right? Where currently we have a little bit of money going to workforce housing where the developer agrees to a 40-year tax credit or subsidy plan to keep rents at a certain rate. We could just expand upon that and do that. And then taxes is also a huge piece of this. If we provide first-time home buyer tax relief, $150,000 homestead exemption or a 3, 4, 5-year step up in taxable basis, you've eliminated more than half of that, what is driving the cost of a home. Because right now, insurance and taxes end up costing more than the person's note on the home if you're a first-time home buyer. Those are Florida solutions. But I think the principle maybe for this audience is important. I wish the private sector had the solutions for affordability. It doesn't for housing.
We could build more. We could take some of the regulations off and let people build more.
Sure.
Some parts of Florida at least, or build higher.
We could also use government subsidies to make it easier to build. The point that I'm getting to is where I think private markets are not satisfying the need right now on affordability. The government does have a role to step in. Look, my Republican friends call the state catastrophic fund for insurance socialism.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. I just call it cheaper insurance because the private market's failed and it's not coming back, and the government has to step in and solve a problem for people.
Are you seeing the tariff impact anywhere, like locally, like some examples I might not be familiar, because you're just out and about, you see the impact on people?
Oh yeah. Listen, I still think there's a latency to it, but the cost of goods is real. We have good friends who own a coffee shop, and right now they're eating all the additional expenses of the increase in goods for coffee, but it is real. It is real. And so the relief that Trump promised is not going away. The relief that DeSantis has talked about is not there. And so I do think this is going to contribute to Democrats having an incredible cycle next November. This could be a sweeping generational cycle for Democrats next November.
Last thing on the vaccines. There is some discussion about banning vaccine mandates in schools in Florida. Really?
There are very few things a governor can do on day one in the state of Florida, but one of them is I can fire the Surgeon General of the state of Florida. He should be fired. He is making the state less safe. He is suggesting repealing vaccine mandates for school children, and admitted to Tapper that they didn't do any research, any public health research on this. It's just a question of freedom. He doesn't think families should have to do this. But our Surgeon General serves at the pleasure of the governor. This is Ron DeSantis's problem. This is Ron DeSantis's vision. Ron DeSantis is making Florida less safe. And so, yes, one of the things I talk about one, I like being a Democrat because I get to believe in data and science and math and public health. Well, guess what? As governor, I'm going to bring back data and science and math and public health and vaccines. And it's amazing, Tim, how that is resonating, whether it is fear of natural disasters and climate science that has not been paid attention to public health, or to actually returning to places of leadership, subject matter experts in our state university system, our water district boards, our public service commission that regulates utilities. The idea of actually putting in leadership in Florida, adults with experience and subject matter expertise, is something that's resonating in this cycle. It just shows you how bad Republicans have left this, but it's also why we have a historic opportunity to change direction.
I lied. One more last question. You're not running against Ron DeSantis, actually, if you get the Democratic nomination. And he, the person most likely to get the Republican nomination right now is Byron Donalds, congressman. Not exactly a ton of experience, you wouldn't say, management experience, interesting background. What give us a little bit of a 1 minute contrast with Byron Donalds.
Yeah, because I'm prepared to lead and he's not, is probably the main thing. And this is a question of change versus more of the same. He represents more of the same, and I represent change. This is an open seat, which is also why we're going to win. Look, we have polls on both sides now showing this race even up. That was our goal for next summer. Tim, not only can we win this race, we are going to win Florida. For the first time in 30 years, Florida's voters are going to elect a Democratic governor next November. I do think Byron Donalds, who has the backing of Donald Trump, will be challenged by a proxy candidate for Ron DeSantis. That might be his wife or his lieutenant governor. There will be an epic Republican primary in the state of Florida for the next year. They will destroy each other. The dirt that the DeSantis camp is already shoveling around on Donalds makes Mark Robinson blush. I mean, that Republicans are about to go at it. They are about to go at it in Florida. And so are there any
pizza stories for Byron Donalds? Or I don't know if it's possible to make Mark Robinson blush.
The only reason I know about this is the press has asked me to comment, and I've said I don't know about it. I don't want to know about it. That's their family feud. But what we know from Robinson is Donald Trump will still get Donalds back. And I think Donalds comes out beating the DeSantis proxy candidate and is very wounded. So then my job as a Democrat for the next 14 months is to unify our party. And I say this to Democrats: where I am insufficient, make me smarter. Where I need to be made stronger, help me. I want to lead shoulder to shoulder, not out front. My race is not about lifting my voice. It's about lifting yours. And so if we build a coalition across Florida that amplifies Democratic values, gives reason for independents and Republicans to say, you know what? I might still vote for a Republican in the Senate race or my congressional race, but in that governor's race, I can actually see a new direction. Maybe I'll vote for a Democrat for the first time. This is the opportunity Democrats have. The fail point for us will be if we turn on each other. And so that's why I say these values are big enough to hold us together. Let's go contrast that with Byron Donalds or DeSantis's proxy, and I think we win.
All right. David Jolly, good to see you with
Tim.
your candidate jacket on. Good luck out there. Good luck with the kids. Have fun on the lazy river, and keep us posted on the campaign. All right.
I'll do it. Thanks, Tim. Good to be with you.